This has been one for the ages, with Brian Goorjian, the new coach, and a team that prior to the season starting, well, they were in administration and one wondered if they were even going to get on the floor, but they are the best team in the country.
I think it's huge for basketball. I love Sydney, I love being in Sydney, and I love being around a champion like Shane, and this has been a dream run. I'm going to make sure if I learn anything out of the last couple, you got to enjoy it more. This is special, man.
Gorge has been unbelievable. We're thinking of Brett Brown because he's a big part of this, and everyone's knocked us for so long, mate. And I just want to thank all the people that supported us, and we did it for them and our families.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is NBL Rewind, and I'll tell you this, Liam Santamaria, hello to you. What a game we have just watched, and for people at home, and Sydney King fans in particular, they've had a little bit of success since then, but they'll be losing their mind. That championship back in 2003 over the Perth Wildcats, it was fun, wasn't it?
Very fun. First of the three-peat. Big one for our man Hammer here.
Yes.
We've got to talk about Chris Williams, obviously a big part of all of that. And, good one to go back and watch.
And we do welcome a legend in the NBL, of course. Hammer, Shane Heal, Olympian, championship we're going to get to, and so much NBA, Europe, all the rest of it. And something I didn't know until moments ago. The leading rebounder in this game for the Sydney Kings, Hammer. I apologise. I didn't look at your rebound stats. You had a great game, but, man, welcome.
Well, it's only natural, mate, that you would just assume with an athlete like myself that I would have got a lot of boards. So nice to be here, mate, and nice to know that the memory actually worked, that I missed a triple-double by a single rebound.
Now, yet again, apologies. I didn't expect this to be the opening topic. It was a wonderful game, wonderful moment we'll get to. But did you have any triple-doubles in your career? Because you're one off in the biggest one of your life.
Zero. Had absolutely a duck egg donut. So it makes it a little bit saltier. That I just couldn't have got up there and got an extra one at the time.
Hey, you got something else. You got that ring after what had been obviously a long career of trying. And we've watched the game. It's always fun to go back and reminisce for us neutral fans. But putting yourself back 17 years, what's the first emotion that comes to mind?
Oh, a little bit of relief. You certainly don't want to be a player that goes through your career and doesn't win a championship. And I didn't feel like I played on too many teams that had a legitimate chance to be able to get that done. So, it was only that off season that people forget. We were like the Illawarra Hawks. We were in administration. There was no club. People were jetting off and talking about going to other clubs. I was considering going to Europe. We ended up staying together. One of my best mates, Grant Cadee, was the general manager. He pulled the whole thing together. We went and headhunted Brian Goorjian. I ended up becoming an owner. I owned 10% of the club at the time with the new ownership group, moving forward. And then to think that we were able to go from outside the top four to win a championship, it was unbelievable. Great group to do it with.
You talk about bringing Gorge in at the start of that year. It was the Titans, obviously. We folded down here and he jetted up there when Brett Brown left. How much of a game changer was he? Brett obviously was terrific and is an outstanding coach, but how did Gorge change things that then resulted in that title?
Well, he just totally changed the entire culture. And I think it was as good for Gorge as what it was for us. We needed him so much to be able to come in and to be able to add a defensive component to our game. The team was recruited. So we'd already done all of that. We got the Americans and everything else. And then, so Gorge was handed the team. He brought in Brad Sheridan, who was a great little piece as well. Ended up starting and good compliment to the pieces we had. But Gorge's mindset, he was a salesman. He was the best at being able to sell a game plan and strategy. You could go, we would play against the bottom team and he'd have you convinced that this team was coming after you and that you were the underdog to be able to beat this team. But the defensive component was important for us. But Gorge had just come off losing 5 straight grand finals, I think it was. And traditionally he'd recruited, a lot of people that were tough, defensive minded, but probably couldn't put a lot of points on the board. So he sort of inherited this team, walked in, and he goes, oh, okay, this is how we play. And I think that combination of offense and defense was just fantastic.
What do you remember about heading into this one? Game 2, you guys finish it off in 2, on the road, snap their neck, you with the big almost triple-double. What do you remember about the lead-up or the mindset as you guys were in the locker room heading out towards playing this game?
Well, game one, we were down 14 points with 4.5 minutes to go. And you could just see everybody in Sydney, because the Kings are, they were labelled one of the worst sporting franchise in Australian history because they just couldn't win anything. And you'd see there was 10,500 people at game one, and every single one of them had their arms crossed going, these guys aren't going to get it done. And here we are. We come from that many points down. We really dodged a bullet. And from that point, I knew that we had them. And my wife said, I might just wait for game 3. And I said, there's no game 3. You've got to get on a plane. You're coming over for the celebrations. She came, and I remember talking to Matty Nielsen and Chris Williams. They were on my bed, and I said, we're winning this game. We're coming out hard. We will win this game. It was like just a confident mindset that we had momentum, had the belief, and that they would have gone in feeling, how did we lose that game? They sort of would have gone in really deflated. We were the opposite, and we didn't have a lot to lose because we knew we had a game up our sleeve as well.
In that situation, you mentioned the Sydney team and the Kings and the culture around sporting teams in Sydney. How much pressure or extra pressure did you feel? No championship for the Kings at that point, high profile in a grand final series. Did that kind of stuff play into it as well?
Yeah, I mean, I carried a lot of that pressure because I hadn't won a championship either, and the expectations internally that we were going to be able to do that. But we knew we were playing against a great team as well, with Ricky Grace and Tony Ronaldson, James Harvey, all these guys, and a lot of fringe boomers and good imports. So it was always going to be tough. We'd had some really close battles during the regular season as well. So we knew it was a challenge. We respected them. But you did carry that pressure and expectation that if you didn't get it done, it was almost like you'd sort of failed. Well, you'd failed again. And that was my greatest opportunity to be able to do it. It was the Kings' greatest opportunity. And like I said, there was still that belief as well as carrying the pressure.
All right, so you get into this game, you got that confidence you touch on, we're going to do this, and that's pretty much how the game panned out. You touched on the fact that the Wildcats might have been thinking, how do we lose game 1? But you controlled it for most of the 48 minutes as it was. Looking back, is there a particular moment that you're like, you know what, this is it. It's finally going to happen for me and the team?
Yeah, I think midway through the fourth quarter was probably the first time you think you take your foot off the gas a little bit to go, hold on, I'm going to get this done. We've still got a double-figure lead. We jumped out of the gates. And we had 4 players that averaged over 18 points a game. And that was one of the only seasons I ever played on where I could score, I think I might have had like 5 or 7 in a game, and I've had 49 in a game. But you could still win either game. So you weren't relied on to have to, score all the time. It was part of your role, but you could control things and create and just buy your time. And it was the most enjoyable season I ever had from Goorjian's perspective, the teammates that we had around us, the way we gelled, the way we felt. So it was a relief to be able to get that championship, no doubt.
Another when did you know question. Chris Williams, unbelievable season. Rest in peace, of course. When did you know? At what point did you know he was going to be that guy, MVP, grand final MVP? Was it when he first arrived? I don't know. I feel like I remember watching him in the first couple of games and going, I'm not entirely convinced about this guy, and being completely wrong. When did you know? It's
funny you say that because he came out on a trial and played 2 games. I still remember I didn't play those games. I sat back with Grant Cadee and we evaluated the games. No one took stats in the first game, and it was played at Alexandria. And it might have been against Arizona or someone like that.
Yeah.
And we were sitting back and we're like, this guy's smooth. He just does a bit of everything. He's great. And then we spoke to other people after the game. They're like, I don't think he's going to be up to it. He's not big enough. He can't shoot from outside, all the rest of it. So then he played a second game. That time we took the stats, and it was the same opinion from other people who hadn't seen the stats, but he was just that sort of player that was unassuming. One of the best teammates I've ever had off the floor was his first year. He was a rookie. I think he came, I can't remember, Virginia or Maryland or somewhere like that. Unbelievable bloke, but just a great teammate, always in the right place at the right time, really complimenting. He actually felt like he was an Aussie. He just felt in, he just fit in. And but then as the season went on, you just realised that he was pretty special without having some of those characteristics that other people would see with athleticism. And, he still dunked it, and he was an athlete, but he was a sneaky athlete. He just had a great feel for the game. And Yeah, real sad day, when he passed away. He's just a champion.
Would you like to see the Kings retire his number 33?
Yeah, I think it'd be a really nice thing. It's hard because so many organisations move on and don't have a lot to do with some of the people that have come before the ownership and management and everything else, which is normal. But the people that were around him would like to be able to see that, because he was a special guy, special player, and just a huge part of really, getting that first championship.
All right, you win this title, you win your first NBL championship, and then you went back to the NBA for a little bit, played some spot NBA games on the back of it. Is this correct?
Yeah, well, I retired. It was like the pressure and the build-up for me. I sat back. Grant Cadee had decided that, he was moving on. He was my best mate. He was my manager. No conflict of interest there. And he goes, no, we've won the championship. I'm done. And I sort of sat back within a couple of weeks, and I remember saying, you know what? I think I'm done too. And, I spoke to Goorj and said, mate, I think I'm going to hang him up. And I was just planning on playing some part-time basketball, probably go back to Europe from Christmas time, play half a season in Europe again, and rest the body and be able to play a bit longer. And then I got the call up to the Spurs, went into camp, underdone, didn't think I was going to make it. They had a few injuries, ended up making their roster, got cut. And then the next day they put me back on again, stayed, played, I don't know, I was there probably about 3 months, got cut again, and then picked up a job in Greece and went back to Greece, and then ended up playing the Olympics again.
See, this is what retirement should be like, Liam. Like, you retire, Olympics, NBA, Greece, play a coach. This is what should just happen after you retire. Like, retirement isn't the end. I've always said that.
More comebacks than Johnny Farnham I had, I'll tell you. Because then after the Olympics, I retired again. I said, nah, I'm going to the Gold Coast. I'm going to relax up on the Gold Coast. And then ended up bloody coming back for the Dragons.
In my calculations, you didn't officially retire for another 7 years. Is that right? It might even be 8.
Yeah, I think because then I had a couple of years at the Dragons, and then I ended up playing for Brennan Joyce back on the Gold Coast. So I had a season there. I think I was 39 when I retired. My first game was 17, and last game was 39.
You talk about that first game. Let's wind it right back to that one. We were talking before the show about Ricky Grace's first game, your involvement in that. How about your first game at 17 years and 5 months, a 64-point margin in your opening game in the NBL? What do you remember about that very first night?
The only thing I remember, I couldn't tell you who we played or how I played or anything like that. I remember saying to my wife, girlfriend at the time, now wife, I said, I love it when they play that song, We Will Rock You. And they play it all the time. And I remember after the game, I said to her, I can't believe in my first game they didn't play that song once. And she looked at me and said, are you kidding? They played it the entire game. I must have just been locked in and just so into it. You just sort of didn't take anything else in. That's the only thing I remember about my first game.
Well, you won by a record margin. You beat the Geelong Supercats, who went winless in that particular year. But then at the end of it, you went there. Like, what goes through a player's mind early in the career when you cross to a team that's been struggling?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because, Boondall, we averaged 13,000 people or whatever it was, and basketball was just so big up there. But, the thing for me was I was playing alongside Darren Perry, who was a friend of mine, but I was playing more the shooting guard position. And I knew that I had to be a point guard to be able to play for Australia, which was my ultimate goal. And DP was a great point guard. I still had a lot to learn in that. And, my mentor was Barry Barnes growing up at Nunawading, and he'd been cut from Nunawading and picked up the job in Geelong, and he called me and said, come on, let's get down here and let's sign a 3-year deal. We're going to hand you the keys to the team. You're going to be the point guard, and let's try and get you on that Australian team and all the rest of it. And it was whilst you're going to a 2,000-seat stadium from, the glory of playing for the Brisbane Bullets and history, going into a team that did not win a single game. I think it's the only time any team in the history of the NBL hasn't won a game. So to go there was completely different. But I think we might have won like 5 or 6 games. The next year we won like 10 or 12. The next year we finished equal second on about 16 wins. And Barry did an unbelievable job. And I love my time in Geelong.
Just on that, when you did win that game in that first year, and it had been a long time, did you celebrate like you'd won a championship? How did that all go? Because I imagine there was you talked relief earlier. There would have been a fair bit of it.
Well, I mean, we tried to separate ourselves from that donut year, that's for sure. But still, at the same time, I reckon, I'm getting old, but I reckon that's in the 1989. I reckon it was against Illawarra in the Snake Pit on the road, and I reckon we drank hard that night.
You talked about the phone call from Barry Barnes. Free agency right now in the NBL, moving and shaking. We saw a whole bunch of deals get done 1 minute past the hour on the very first day of free agency.
Yes. Funny that.
Tell us about your experiences in free agency. When those first phone calls happened, the whining, the dining, how did it all play out?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I think any time that you finish your contract, it's sort of, sometimes it's different. Like for when I moved to Geelong, it was different because you've got Barry Barnes there. And then after that 3 years, I was in negotiations to stay for another 3 years at Geelong. And then they sacked Barry Barnes. So he's taken the club from nothing to that. And then they sacked him. And I was like, I can't play here. You've just done that to my mentor and friend and coach and somebody I love and respect. So it was natural for me to go back to Brisbane. Brian Curl recruited me back there. So each one's a little bit different. The hardest decision I ever made that kept me awake at night was when I came back from Europe. And Grant Cadee, who I've spoken about, at the time, he was the general manager of the Melbourne Tigers and my manager. And I'd been training with the Melbourne Tigers in my off-season because I had a house in Melbourne and I was playing in the NBA, playing in Europe. Every off-season, I would just come back and train with them full-time. And Lindsay and Drewy don't recruit anyone. And they recruited me hard. And it was either stay in Melbourne or go back to Sydney. And the hard choice was to go back to Sydney because they'd never won a championship. And I even reflect on, the way the teams are put together now in the NBA. And it's an easy decision, I reckon, to go to a team that's already stacked. I didn't want to go to a team, even though I loved all those guys and everything else, and Coates and Hoagie, the team where you almost just fell into a championship. And for me, it was the hard road going back to Sydney. And sort of glad I did it, but it was the hardest thing calling Lindsay Gaze. That was bad.
That would have been the formation of the original NBL super team. Had you have gone that way, we'd be still talking about it, how you changed the game. Like we might see difference. We haven't seen, of course, what happens in the NBA head to the NBL as such, and much different reasons for that. But yeah, it would have been fun to watch for people like Liam and I growing up in the mid-90s, watching who we loved what you did when it came to Australia with Andrew Gaze in the backcourt, but to be able to do it that way as well. Because I think Drewy might have mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we had him on. He's still dirty about it, actually, Hammer. He reckons you cost him a couple of more championships.
It would have been a whole lot of fun because I loved training against those guys, and I was a bit embarrassed because, obviously I was playing overseas. I'd come and train with him, and Lindsay would take one of the 10 out and send them down the other end, and I was straight into scrimmaging, and I was he'd say to Drewy, "Oh mate, is that sort of right? Like they're actually in the team, mate." Well, but it was great because you'd speak trash to Copes, and he just wouldn't shut up, and all over Drewy. It was good fun.
You talked about the move back to Brisbane, playing with Brian Curl. Take us to Townsville in '94, the 61-point game. What do you remember about that night?
Well, the hoop looked like a hula hoop. I know that. But it's funny because I was playing for, Bruce Palmer. And Bruce Palmer was a hard person to play for. He was really hot and cold. And I remember I'd played against one of Goorjian's teams who was always hard to play against. And I reckon I might have had 5 points or something like that. And I remember him giving me a spray after the game and saying, "You're too slow and you can't do this," and whatever. And I remember I was that fired up to prove my own coach wrong to have a big game. And I think he took me off before I got 50. And I remember Robert Sibley going up and saying, "Mate, he's about to get 50, put him back on." So put me back on. This is in the last quarter, went back on. And then he went to take me off when I had 50 something. And he's like, "Mate, he's about to get 60. So stayed on and ended up having 60. It was a nice night. Beautiful rims. Great stadium. I love Townsville.
The Bandit. You are that good looking out.
He was my man, the Bandit, no doubt about it.
What goes through someone's mind when you come off an NBL court and you've had 61? Like what are you thinking? Because it is remarkable. Like, no, very rarely do people score anywhere in the world of basketball that type of points. Like, what goes through your mind? Is it like, geez, I had a great night, or geez, my game's gone to a new level, or like, what is it?
No, you don't. I mean, you just realise, just like when you have 5 points a couple of weeks early, you don't think it's the end of the world and you've lost your game. I don't think that you get to the stage where you're thinking, oh, my game's gone to a whole nother level. I think just think, geez, things went right. I was able to make shots. And even from a junior, I was one of those players that if I got hot, I could put a lot of points on the board, and sort of did that in different leagues wherever I played. But 61 was sort of, because I only took 29 shots. So I was like, you're shooting it all right. But when you're going up by threes, it makes it a little bit easier.
You talk about those nights that you got hot, Hammer. On the way to Atlanta, Salt Lake City, the incident with Charles Barkley. You've been asked and you've talked about that forever. I want to ask you about that night and the way you were balling out. Like, did you look at that situation against that team as, this is my chance? This is my chance to, I mean, obviously you're preparing for an Olympics, but like players have looked at these NBL, NBA games at various times, like, if I go out and show what I could do, this could lead to something.
Yeah, I remember my manager had been sending videotapes out of the season I was having at the Sydney Kings. And it was actually good in those days because you were playing, it was right in the middle of our NBL season. So it's not like in the off season, you got to stay fit, and that was right in the middle. So we went into that game feeling great about ourselves. We all knew our roles, really familiar with each other, had a great team. And I remember feeling like more that we were making a statement ourselves as a team in the lead up to the Olympics, rather than me being able to make a statement for the NBA or anything like that. I was so focused on us having a great Olympic Games. But then once you get hot and you start making a shot, and then you make another one, and then all of a sudden, again, same thing, the confidence goes up. Making those first couple of shots was always really big for me. And I felt like then I could go on a little bit of a run. And then obviously the incident, and, you're playing in front of 20,000 people, and, the emotions are running high because we just didn't want to take a backward step. But Charles Barkley and Gary Payton and Malone, they'd lost their mind that night. I can't believe that they even carried on like that against the bloody Australians. You kidding?
Well, Gary Payton was hating the fact that you were just doing whatever you almost wanted to out there. And then, you know what, in today's day and age, how the game's refereed, Charles Barkley would get thrown out for what he did.
And Malone and all the rest of it. He didn't even get a foul for taking my legs out. It was like, are you kidding? Come on, at least give me the extra shot. I was more just disappointed I didn't get the extra free throw than anything else. But no, he ended up being, fantastic. And, then getting to play against them, in front of whatever it was, 40,000 people at the Atlanta Dome. So we'd made the top four, and then the pressure's really on because they know exactly who you are. They've been able to scout you for a whole tournament. They know your strengths and weaknesses. They've got a game plan, against, Drewy and myself, who were the main scorers, and all the rest of it. And we played a great game. That was probably the game that I was as proud of as anything else, because we came as close to them as anyone in the tournament.
Looking back on that,
Just go back to Salt Lake City, though, for a second.
Yep.
What was the yak like? I mean, Gary Payton is famous for being a great trash talker, and your juices were flowing because, as you said, you got hot and you couldn't miss. Take us onto that floor and what was being said.
Well, and I got off on the talking smack. People in the NBL, probably didn't want to talk to me. Even I would actually, if I wasn't playing well, then start to talk to try and get involved. And it was almost like common knowledge, just ignore him, don't get involved, don't say anything, whatever else. But Gary Payton, like, he was talking that much smack about what he was going to do to me after the game. And I don't care about basketball. This is what I'm going to do to you, and blah, blah, blah. And he was out of control. And, the good thing was I had plenty of time to be able to come up with a bit of ammo, because I wasn't expecting anything like that. So the next time we played them, I had a little bit of ammo for Gary Payton, talking about the hole in his glove and all of that sort of stuff. The whites of his eyes, he was like out of control. And, I remember telling him at the free throw line because he used to chew all that gum, and he'd be in your face chewing the gum, talking to you. And I remember saying, man, the first thing you want to do, I think he signed a $69 million or $79 million contract. And I said, the first thing you want to do with that contract, buy yourself a jump shot. And he was like, oh, not happy at all.
That's great.
Gee, just on that particular Olympic campaign, of course, 4 Olympics for yourself, and oh so close in 96 to that medal, and while 2000 the bronze medal game was a bigger margin, a wonderful tournament for the Boomers as well. When you look back, in particular those two, how much disappointment is that you couldn't quite get that medal?
Oh, I mean, it's sweet and sour, because to make the top 4, when I'd go and play in Greece, people would say to me, they're like, Malaka, Australia's in the top 4? Are you kidding? Like, they couldn't believe it. But we would see it as a failure that we'd finished 4th. For us, it was a failure internally because, especially 2000, we said it was medal or bust. This was our best team ever, great opportunity. And we got blown away for that bronze medal game. But in 96, had we had Luke Longley, things are different. Sabonis absolutely killed us. Mark Bradkey did a great job of being able to fight outside his weight class. He's 6'10" against 7'2". They were a great team, Lithuania. And, we were within 2 points with 10 seconds to go or whatever it was. We had our chances and poked ourselves in the eye, unfortunately.
You finished the Olympics and the NBA. The Minnesota Timberwolves come calling. Talk us through that process and how it really propelled from that Olympic Games and all the tapes being sent out to becoming an NBA player.
Yeah, I mean, it was, some players want to know what's happening during a tournament about what sort of interest, and some people don't. It's like, just don't tell me. I was like, mate, what's the interest? Who's talking to you? What's going on? What are my chances? And I'm into it. So it's inspiring me to play better for the team. And I think at the end of it, I can't remember, it was 5 or 7 teams had made me offers of minimum wage, non-guaranteed. And, I remember, again, Kadee saying the first 2 people he spoke to was Jerry West at the Lakers and Kevin McHale at Minnesota. So he's pinching himself because he's my 29-year-old manager, managing his first international player, talking to those 2 legends. So it was interesting. The reason why I went to Minnesota was for a tryout, because they were the most inclined that if I went into Summer League and did well, to sign me for more than minimum wage, and they were prepared to talk about a multi-year deal. And to be honest, it was a little bit unfair going into that training camp because it was the off season for everybody else. So I was head to head with Steph Marbury, who I think was the number 3 pick. He was going to be their superstar with Kevin Garnett. And I'd come off playing against the best players in the world in peak shape in the middle of the NBL season. And I'd played the best basketball I ever played at that camp and just shot the absolute bejeebers out of it. And the stats they showed me, they keep every stat of how many times you dribble it left, how many times you dribble it right, 2 dribbles, off and on ball, all the percentages of everything. And it was just a great tournament for me. I played well at the Summer League and ended up signing a 3-year deal.
And then when you got out there on the floor, continued to play well. That game, particularly against Seattle, 5 threes in a quarter. What do you remember about that one?
I remember the crowd going wild. It was, and it actually goes back one game before that. I think we were in Washington, and again, they signed Terry Porter to come in, who was obviously an NBA All-Star, but he was older as a veteran, to come in and back up Steph Marbury, who was still only a teenager. And then they've got this Aussie. And back in 1996, they didn't respect, I don't care what they say, they didn't respect international players.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying, okay, that's all cool. You're 26, but you're going to do your time. We're signing you for 3 years. Your first year, you're not going to play. Do your time, and it's all good. And I got in, I think at Washington, same thing, 3-quarter time. We might have been down 20, and I think I had like 11 or 12 or something in the last quarter. The next game we come home, same thing happens. I hadn't got in, and then I get in, make my first shot, and then it's like, oh, okay, here we go, make another shot, and then you get that rhythm and started feeling it. But then from that point, I remember I had friends in the stand, I had family, called my mates at home, and I said, you're not going to believe it, I just hit 15 points in the quarter. Now's my time. I'm going to be in the rotation. I'm good to go. Tune in. And back those days, you couldn't watch games. They used to go to the casino where they were viewing NBA games. So the next game, I had mates go to the casino to watch me in this next game, ready to go. I played 16 seconds. Yeah. Got in for 16 seconds at the end of a quarter, and then didn't get on for 5 straight games or something after that. So it messed with your emotions, and I certainly didn't have the patience than say of a Paddy Mills that was prepared just to do years on the bench and probably wanted things a bit quicker, which was more my fault than theirs.
Do you regret that? I mean, you come out, as I said, 5 threes in a quarter. Like you showed, we know, we saw at the Olympics as well, that you can be an impact player at that level. Do you regret not sticking with it and playing out the rest of your career in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of emotions, and I don't look back on too many things and think, oh, I should have done that. That was definitely one thing that I regretted, because I went back. They sat me down at the end of the first year. I averaged 7 minutes, and they said, okay, Terry Porter's not coming back. You're the backup point guard. If Steph's not playing, you're starting. You have to be a starting point guard. That's the level that we expect you. So I went and worked the hardest I've ever worked, and went to Summer League at Utah, which was the big Summer League back then. That's Vegas. And we shared a team with Orlando Magic, so we could only play 20 minutes each. Right. And I led the entire NBA Summer League in assists, and had a great Summer League, went into camp, was feeling great. Steph Marbury was injured at the start of my second year, so I started the first 6 games of exhibition. I was playing really well. And then in the last game, I tore my calf to an extent that I was going to be out 14 to 16 weeks. It was horrific. I've never seen anything like it. And they said, oh, well, you've got to do your time. You know, they take it. They're like, oh, well, it's going to take you that long. It's 4 months. So what? Get right. And living in Minnesota, I had 2 kids under 2. It was minus 30. Got impatient. I said, no, I'm not. I need to go home. I don't want to do this. My agent went to the club. They said, mate, relax. You got a 3-year deal. Just sit back, get yourself right. Went back again, said, no, I want to go home. They said, no, do your time. Went back a 3rd time, and then it got to the point where they said, well, if that's how you're going to be, then fair enough. And it is something that I regret a little bit, because I think once you're there and you play at that level, I found it easier to play in the NBA than it is to play for Australia, play at the Olympic Games. Because over 82 games, people aren't going hard the whole time. And you're coming off the bench and you're playing a role. And to be able to play 15, 20 minutes in the NBA and play that role in the second unit, I think is a role that would have been really good.
Did you wear number 10 as a nod to Andrew Gaze, or just a coincidence?
Yeah. No, I did it because I always felt that Drewy should have played in the NBA and should have got more opportunities in the NBA. And, you know, we just finished the 96, and it was out of respect to Drewy. I said, I'm going to wear number 10.
It's funny you mentioned it earlier as well. I think the same thing about you, and we've spoken about the Andrew Gaze situation. I think the way that the game is today and how the international players are so much more received and get more court time and more exposure and all the rest of it, I think if you were in your prime now as Andrew Gaze, I think it'd be a hell of a lot different. I think Drew would, and I've said this, I reckon he'd average 25 points a game in the NBA if 1988 Drewy, 1990 Drew was playing in 2020, and I think similar with you. I think the internationals have come a long way in 30 years, and I think the acceptance of it is a huge part of that when it comes to court time.
Yeah, it's the mindset and the acceptance. And you only have to go back to some of the superstars in Europe that went to the NBA in the first couple of years, just didn't really get on, but ended up showing that they could, average 20 a game. Drewy is a freak. I mean, he could score at any level that he played at. He just had such a great basketball IQ and could accumulate points like no one else. So, yeah, it's something that's sort of disappointing. But at the same time, you sort of feel like, well, hopefully that experience then, paved the way a little bit, like all the other international players, to make it easier for other people. And then when you look at, guys like Paddy, that, you take your hat off to him because he was in the same situation and was prepared to wave a towel for years. It's just that mentality that that's just what I've got to do. I'm going to do it. And now you look at him playing there for that long, and, well done to him.
Well, I'll tell you this, Liam. Had Hammer have hung around, played NBA and spent 10, 12 years there, as he probably could have, we wouldn't have seen the one thing that I want to see, one of the one things I want to see back in the NBL. I want to see the court storm, as we spoke with Steve Carfino a couple of weeks ago, and I want to see a player coach. Hammer?
I was sure you were going to say you wanted to see the double bird again. The double bird in Adelaide.
You know what?
I thought that's what you're leading up to, just ordering one beer from each bar. And, the Adelaide faithful, they love me there.
You know what? We will see the double bird again. That I'm confident with, but I'm not certain we'll see another player coach again. How hard was it?
The circumstances was the most difficult because, Mark Price, I was so excited to play for Mark Price because he was an NBA star. And you're thinking, how much can I pick up off this bloke? Mm-hmm. And, the longer time went on, it was evident to everybody that was involved, from management to players to everyone, that he just, the only reason why he came to Australia is that, he wasn't going to be a coach, and, didn't really have the passion and work ethic to be able to do it either. So sort of thrown into a difficult situation. And I guess when you walk into a situation, I think we were 0-5 or 0-6.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing I said, I took 24 hours to make my mind up, because I knew how it would look as well. It's like, oh, here's a player taking over a coach that's just been sacked. It's like just a terrible sort of look. And, it was tough. And then the reason why I ended up doing it is I said, well, who are they going to get? Who are they going to get right now to coach this team that I actually want to play for? And there was names thrown around, and I'm like, I don't want to necessarily play for them. Anyway, we got things back on track, and made a few adjustments and ended up making the playoffs. And I think we were the first year franchise to ever make the playoffs. So it was huge, and I just wish they had have spent the same sort of money they did the following year on our recruiting for our second year. But it was tough, but it was a good experience as well.
At least when you got hot, you knew the coach wasn't going to drag you.
The best thing is that when I'd sub myself off, and you're sort of sitting there and you're like, you know what, I might go on. And you just wander up, not say anything to anyone, wander up to the bench and go, yep, sub. I kind of like that.
Of course, the best thing about that first Dragons year was Joe Ingles. 29 on debut. You missed that game watching it. Were you watching it?
Yeah, I warmed up. I was supposed to play. I hurt my back in the warm-ups.
Right.
That's what happens when you get old and you've retired for a couple of years on the Gold Coast. You try and come back.
I asked you, when did you know with Chris Williams? When did you know with Joe Ingles?
You loved Joe from day one. You loved his personality. You loved, his eagerness to be able to get better. We would shoot, and it was a massive challenge. And I hope you get him on the show one day, because I remind him of it all the time. When I took over, that I could not believe his shooting technique. He would jump and he would land 1.5 meters to his right on a catch and shoot jump shot every single time. And I'm like, mate, how can you do that? Has no one ever stopped you doing that? And we worked and we competed, because he just jumped into all my shooting drills that I knew that I had to be able to do. And he's never beat me. He knows that too. I talk to him about it all the time. But to say back then that you think that he would play in the NBA wasn't something you knew at that stage. He always had the length and potential. I remember defensively trying to make a post-entry pass against him, defending a point guard. It was so hard to do. He was so good defensively. And it was just how much he was going to improve his strength and everything else. But he's such a student of the game. And to see what he's doing now, and his ability and poise and ability to be able to make his team better, is just a pleasure.
I want to ask you about Stephen Jackson. I know you didn't play a great deal of time with him, but a lot of people forget that Stephen Jackson played in the NBL. He was almost I won't say the original next star, but it was kind of that model. He broke his foot. What was it like? 5 years later, he was in the stands in Detroit and all the rest of it. What was it like?
He was a champion. He was rough and ready. High school kid. He used to come over to my house nearly every night to call his mum. He was really close to his mum. And so he'd come and use my international phone to be able to speak to her. But we would hang out all the time. He was really raw back then. And, we all said at the time it was a big mistake for them not to wait and give him a chance for his foot to heal. I think he was only going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, but they sort of jumped on it quick, brought somebody else in. It was a terrible season. I think revolving door of international players. But he was a great guy. And you could see from the start that he had the ability and the size to be able to go further. But it was just great to see one bad experience and then for it actually work out better for him. Had he played well there, back then, it might have been really difficult for him to then make the NBA within a couple of years. You get happy in the NBL and play for 2 or 3 years, 4 years. Who knows what sort of time frame it would have taken for him to get another opportunity.
440 NBL games when it all was finished up after you finished up at the Gold Coast. Got the championship in 03. You talked about, I don't look back and regret many things, but is there anything when you look back on your NBL career, you spoke about what happened in the NBA, but you look at your entire NBL career and go, man, if I could go back, I'd have just made a different call here?
Yeah, it's a good question. You always analyse different things, but try not to lament on decisions. I would have loved to have played for Brian Goorjian a lot longer. He says that it was a good thing that we came together at the time we did. Our relationship was unbelievable. The respect for each other was fantastic. He thinks that we probably would have clashed earlier on because he wasn't a coach that wanted scorers and to play sort of up tempo and everything else. But I actually think that we would have done really well. I think he would have helped my game a lot, and I think I probably would have been able to contribute to what he was doing a little bit more as well. Great guy, great coach. And I think his defensive accountability would have been really good for me, just to ensure you're doing it all the time. Sometimes if you're playing for coaches, you can pick and choose, what you're doing if they're not real hardcore on your accountability of saying, hey, mate, that guy just went around you. You need to be able to contain the ball or do this and do that. So I would have loved to have played for Goorj. That's probably the one thing.
We're talking about free agency happening right now. Goorj, obviously back, is going to coach the Hawks this year. There's talk about Angus Glover with the Sydney Kings, Sunday Dech with the Adelaide 36ers. You look at these young guys who have the...
No, hey, so this is what happens, Hammer. This is what happens. He kicks out his microphone when he gets excited. Without fail, every show.
Is that what he's done?
That's what happens. NBL Overtime, NBL Rewind. Continue, Liam.
Well, I'm glad you got a little excited about something.
What do you think about these guys and this decision?
Well, the best suited free agent for the Illawarra Hawks that would suit them and would suit the player is Sunday Dech. Now, I think he's going to Adelaide, right? Has that been announced, or is that just rumour at the moment? Because they do their work very quickly these days. They just, from bang, within an hour, they've negotiated, they're done. Sunday Dech would fit Goorj's philosophy, particularly with Nar and a great point guard and everything else. His defense, I think Sunday Dech could be one of the better defenders. For me, he's Damian Martin-like as far as what he can do, but he can still, I think he's got upside on the scoring end. So I think it'd be a real disappointment for Goorj and Sunday if they don't actually come together.
I think we're going to be disappointed, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I guess
it sounds like it.
I agree.
But guys like Sam Froling are going to, he's going to be the beneficiary of Goorj going there, and his upside potentially playing in the NBA, which I think he will, of getting somebody like Goorj that will drill. He will drill you the whole time. He doesn't like to scrimmage a lot. You're not playing. Don't think that you'll be playing a whole lot of 5-on-5 up the court. He thinks he's getting loose if he lets you go up and backs and then stop and talk and then up and backs. But what he does works. And, I think some of those young guys are going to be much better players for it.
Before we let you go, mate, you got a daughter who's, obviously progressing through the ranks at rapid rate. Obviously going to go to Townsville in WNBL season, which starts in a couple of months' time. And, you talk about, obviously, you playing for Australia and squads and teams and all the rest of it. But the announcement only a couple of days ago that Shyla is in the Opal squad as we head towards Tokyo 2021. What is it as a parent? What are the feelings that well up when you see the similar type of journey that you've already been on happen to a child?
Yeah, it's funny. I've got 3 daughters and they all have done different things, and you're proud of each kid for what their passion is and support them for their passion. It just happens that Shyla's is basketball, and she's from a young kid. She has been so hell-bent on doing the work. She's just got a terrific work ethic. And I said to my kids, I'm never pushing you. I've had my career. I'm not trying to live my life through yours. If you want to work out, you have to come to me and say, okay, Dad, we need to go work out, and I'll always be there. And that's how she's been. She just pushes and pushes and pushes to the stage where I've got to pull her back a little bit. But she's excited about that opportunity to, play with the best players in Australia and test herself against it. We know the Opals are an amazing team. She's excited to play for Shannon Seabohm at Townsville and, played point guard last year. She sort of sat in the corner a little bit more and played the off guard spot. So that'll be exciting. And then hopefully at some stage she gets the opportunity with the draft next year of sneaking in somewhere and getting an opportunity at camp or whatever that might be as well. So
I don't I don't want to point this out, Liam, but there is a lot of similarities between
There
you and
is.
Shane Hill, Brisbane, Darren Perry, more of a two. Got to take a risk, go to another team, end up playing point guard and go from there. So I can see, was that at all a conversation that happened? You know, obviously she makes her own decisions, no doubt. But is that a conversation that you would have had over the off-season before she signed?
Oh, I mean, we've talk about the bigger picture all the time and then lay those foundations about what you need to do now to be able to grow. It was probably, you know, and I don't want to make it sound worse for Tracy York, because Tracy was fantastic for Shiloh last year, but we were just surprised that Kelly Wilson signed, and we thought Shiloh was going to be the starting point guard and play point guard. So it ended up being, just because of injuries and everything else, that she ended up just playing a different position than what she's always played. So it's probably a little bit different for her, because she's always being that point guard. Next year, probably play a style that I think will really fit the way she wants to play, and will probably help Townsville as well. And, you know, got a lot of respect for what Shannon Seabomb's doing as well. He was my development player when I coached the Dragons, and it's funny how full circle goes around, and he was my assistant coach at the Kings, and you know, I trust him with the development of Shy.
Back in Townsville too. Heels always have nice time. A different gym, obviously, Liam, but looking forward to Shiloh Hill giving us 61 some point at WNBL.
Well, it may not be. You never know.
Really?
I heard a rumour the other day that there may be a chance, and I have no confirmation about that at all, but I said to Shy, if there's a chance you're playing any games there, those rims are beautiful. Go for it.
Really done. Hashtag NBL Rewind. Any last thoughts, Liam, before we let the great man go?
Oh, but before we leave, we're going to get another bit of a take from him about free agency. There's a couple of big announcements in the last few days. Ty Webster, talk about someone coming in to play point guard. Ty Webster, big one in New Zealand. Cam Glidden, Southeast Melbourne this morning. Isaac Humphries at Adelaide. Which signing so far has impressed you the most?
Oh, I think the Webster brothers in New Zealand are probably going to be the most potent. If they can get Hobson in there, who's one of my favourite players, and with, you know, Delaney and Abercrombie, that team is looking really good. They're going to be wild in the backcourt. They'll have some ups and downs, no doubt about it, but it's going to be exciting to watch. I'm really looking forward to Cam Glidden in a new environment. He's going to have to change his mindset, though. You know, we've seen him over the years. I love his game. I know what he's capable of. I think he's a great addition. But I think he can't get caught of just standing in a corner as well. He's got to be aggressive and go and make plays for him to take his game to the next level and help Southeast Melbourne as well. And I'm going to be intrigued about Isaac Humphries. How does that go with the big fella in DJ? It's going to be a big front line. They probably complement each other all right. Who else? If they had Pinder in there, it's probably going to be okay. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm just excited. Please come back before Christmas.
I think all NBL fans are exactly the same. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. If you haven't seen this game yet, which is the one we've got up now, NBL, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, NBL TV, Twitch, wherever you get your NBL content, check it out. 2003, Game 2. Sydney Kings win their first championship. Shane Hill gets his title. Almost a triple-double, which is something we've learned today. My apologies, Hammer, for not realising you're a menace on the boards.
Yeah, that's all right, mate. I'm just sorry that I had to bring it up.
And you had no issue doing it as well.
None at all.
Hammer, thank you.
Good on you, boys. Thank you. Good work.
Keep
up the good work.
NBL free agency market watch. Keep your eyes on that as free agency continues to bubble along. NBL overtime back next Tuesday. We'll see you then.